summer crowds gather to enjoy national canal rallies these days, the boats that get most of the attention usually are the restored working narrowboats, the ones with the roses and castles painted on the doors and the cabin sides, and all that bright lettering and the decorated water cans and the dipper bowls and the bits of gleaming brass. These things are now seen as one of the attractive sides of the old working narrowboat tradition. And today I want to draw attention to the outstanding work of William Hodgson, a boat painter, a local boat painter, who played a very large part in the forging of that tradition. He was born in Crewe in 1878, but he spent most of his boat painting years in Longport and Middleport. Here, he's remembered by a local canal enthusiast, Jim Arkenstall of Norton.
Well, in 1957, I docked a boat at the Mersey Weaver Company, and William Hodgson was working there.
Were you at the time involved in waterways?
No, I was on private boating. You know, pleasure boating. I was pleasure boating in those days.
On the actual occasion that you came to have the paintings, what was it that made you decide to ask him?
Well, I'd seen him doing some, and I liked them that much, and I thought to myself, they're beautiful, those are. You know, he was, and the way he did them, was wonderful. But I met him, and of course we had conversation together and talked quite a lot, and I asked him to do me 2 of these, and he did do.
And did you see him do it?
Yes, I saw him do it, yes. He just cut the piece of hardboard, and the primary colour went on, that was it.
William Hodgson would have painted hundreds of panels of that sort, and they'd usually be fixed to the cabin sides of boats, where they'd be at the mercy of the weather and the knocks of time. I'm happy to be able to say that Jim Arkenstall kept his pair of boards under cover. They're in fine condition today, and they clearly show how fluent and forceful the craft painting of William Hodgson was, even in the last months of his life. Well, with the help of his children, I've been able to learn just a little more about the work of this man whose grandfather, curiously enough at one time, had his own engineering factory in Rouen in France. Well, that's part of a much longer story, but William Hodgson grew up in Crewe among a family committed to railway engineering, and I suggested to William's son, Richard, that it seemed an unlikely background for a budding painter.
Yes, he was the odd man out. He was definitely the odd man out. All the rest, his brothers and all the rest of the family were all engineers.
Now, he moved into painting, and he wasn't always in canal painting. He reached that position by stages, you could say.
Yes, that's right.
What was his early interest in painting?
He was a sign writer, scenic artist, canvas paintings in oils, painted cushion covers, velvet cushion covers, with sprays of roses or scenes or whatever people fancied. Also painted on mirrors, pictures on mirrors. Some of these I think are in existence to this day.
So
he
any of
painted
us
scenes on mirrors.
Any of us who've got the idea that your dad was strictly a canal boat artist have got the wrong idea entirely.
His trade was the canal boat in the finish.
So how did you move from Crewe, I presume, in the direction of Middlewich? I know that your mother had something to do with that.
That's right, yes, that's right. My father was reared by his grandparents at Nantwich, and he was living with his grandparents when he met my mother, and they courted and married. And father went, he was at Loggerheads, I believe, with his father, over this engineering. His father wanted him to be an engineer, but he just would not have engineering, although he could do it. He could do the engineering work. He'd been to Crewe work, and he'd done the work there. But he wouldn't stick it, he just wouldn't have it, he walked off. And back again he went into the painting. That's about the time he met my mother. They courted. At the time, my grandfather, he owned the smithy at Middlewich. On his yard there was 4 little cottages, and of course my grandfather told my mother she could have one, and that's how he finished up on the old smithy, an old cottage. Over the top of the smithy was a very long and high loft, and he said it was just right because he used to do backdrops, what they call backdrops, and the wings and everything were rather large, you know.
So he got a place where he could get on with his
That's
scene
right.
painting.
The scene painting, and he could do a bit of all sorts in this lot.
Would that have been for Crewe Theatre? One of the theatres in Crewe, or would it have been for theatres around generally?
The one I remember mostly was when he painted. There was a fete at Middlewich for the church, Middlewich Church. The Countess of Athlone, I'm pretty sure it was attending this fete, and it was a big thing, you know. She was somebody of note. My father had done all the scenic work for it, the same as he'd usually done at times for Crewe Theatre. And it was this scene that took her eye when she was opening this fete. She wanted him to go to Ireland and do it there. This my father wouldn't do.
Well, how did he come to be connected with the canal? I know that the canal goes through Middlewich and it's a very important part of it.
This was when father was doing a picture for the chap that kept the King's Lock at Middlewich.
The King's Lock Inn,
That's right, yeah.
Just alongside King's Lock.
Yeah, he was doing a picture of a pigeon, and this was a prize-winning bird, and it just won some big competition. And he was that pleased. He had my father painting this pigeon in oils on the canvas. But it was through this that my father got in touch with the dockyard there. The chap that owned the dock was Williams, I think his name. He just almost rebuilt a narrow boat, and he asked my father if he could design this boat. And he looked down it a bit. He said no reason why he couldn't. So he painted it completely from one end to the other, inside, outside. It was from that time on, that this dockyard was finishing all the custom. Mr. Fox of Longport couldn't understand why, neither could the Anderton Company.
These were the holders of the dockyards further down the line.
That's it.
So they were looking out for your dad.
That's right. And Mr. Fox made his way down to Middlewich. Mr. Fox owned the dockyard at Longport. This was against Westport Lake. He wanted to know where the painter was at this dockyard.
Because he was losing business.
That's right, to him. Of course, the chaps there, they told him who he was. They introduced my father to them, and he asked him how he'd like to work. Would he like to come to work for him? And he got him house and all the lot, you know, all the baggage.
And so William Hodgson left Middlewich for Longport to work at the boatyard of Samuel Fox, and he was followed by his whole family later, who moved into a small house quite near to the boatyard itself, number 19 Davenport Street, a cottage which backed onto the Trent and Mersey Canal. Among boat people, the word about William Hodgson's skill in decorative painting soon spread, and this ensured a steady stream of callers at the back door. They'd leave things to be called for on a return journey, such things as water cans, cabin blocks, dipper bowls, and so on. And many of these are now treasured possessions, and a few are finding their way into boat museums. I asked William Hodgson's daughter Phyllis whether her father kept a workshop for painting these smaller pieces.
No, he used to do it in the kitchen of our home then. It was only a small kitchen. When we were children, we used to have to sit on the couch, the old-fashioned couch, and we didn't have to make a noise, you know.
He liked to concentrate?
Yes. And of course we didn't go through the door much because the door was quite close to the table. It would knock everything, and of course it was spoiled and it got to go all over again.
Can you remember any of the processes at all? How he actually got his effects?
Well, when he was doing the roses, we always noticed that he used to do his basic colour, which was green.
The background colour?
The background. And then, of course, on the top of that, he'd start with just three round blobs of probably one would be black, one would be pink, and one would be yellow. And then, of course, he'd bring the other, they'd put the dark shade on, and then the light shade. And when it was finished, you would have the dark red rose, pink rose, and the tea rose.
And he had his own distinctive style. That's what brought people to your back door.
Yes, definitely. They always wanted my father to do them. I suppose he could have got a lot more work if he could have done them. Of course, he hadn't got the time.
Did people ask him to do other things as well as paint roses? I mean, did they ask him to specialise and do particular things on their cans?
Oh yes, yes. He's done pets.
How do you mean pets?
Well, one particular time, this boat came and they had the girl that must have been the daughter. She had a pet and it was a bird, a big bird. And of course, they asked him if he'd do this for him. And I don't know whether she'd still be living, but she was named Linda. And on this can, at the bottom, they had this bird painted where the sailor's head generally is. But I know he's done other things for different ones. But this one I can especially remember because he did it for this girl named Linda. But of course, her other name I couldn't tell you.
The more I hear about him, the more I realise that he painted all sorts of things, not just things to do directly with boats. And you have told me about a panel that he painted specially for the house. Because it was only a tiny house, you could improve your privacy by having a little panel that you could move around somewhere in the rooms. What was that about?
It was like a 3-door screen. It was the size of a door nearly. And there was three doors and it would fold like a concertina. And there'd be different birds on every one. And you'd say, what kind of birds are those? And he'd say, the birds of paradise. And I can remember one of them was a golden-crested crane, and the other one was like, I think it was a moody wolf, or something like that, a funny name, you know. But he knew his birds.
Here's how another of William's sons, John, remembers his father's painting at home.
At the first opportunity, he would clear the table, the kitchen table that is, and then he would put the can on an angle to suit himself. And then I remember the maul stick that he used. And he would first of all paint the various sections. Then he would leave it so on. Then he would come back to it. And I remember him painting the roses. He'd paint the circles, and then fill in the petals in a certain way.
Because you can't just paint a whole flower and finish it.
No,
You've got to do it a section at a time.
Yes. At first it would seem to us as children that it was nothing much at all. And then gradually, as if by magic, the actual flowers would come and were really very artistic.
He was just building it up by touches, just leaving it for a while to dry off, and then coming back to it later and adding a bit more.
Yes, and I especially remember the sailor's head. You know, the picture taken like a cigarette packet.
The player's pleased sailor's head, which is very colourful, isn't it?
Exactly, yes. And he would alter it slightly to suit himself. They would put things on in the background, also the same exactly. He would alter it to suit himself. That was one that the boatmen were very fond of.
As well as painting boats at the boatyard and smaller pieces of boatware at home, William Hodgson would occasionally take up the brushes to paint the inside walls of his home, as his daughter Hilda clearly recalls.
Oh yes, he painted the walls and then painted all the bulrushes and all the birds of paradise. Lovely paintings. And I was telling you about the doctor that came in and said how much he admired it. And he said he would have liked his baby's nursery to have been painted with these birds on it because it was so real.
And it was just freehand decoration.
Oh
on
yes,
the wall.
all the way round.
Didn't he have no interest in wallpaper or?
Oh no, he just did it. Just did it. Yeah. At first we thought, oh, this is going to, it's going to look terrible. They says, well, no, you shan't be able to ask any friends in here, have a look at that. But anyway, when it was finished and everybody came in and said, oh, I've never seen anything like this before, it was admired. We didn't take it so bad,
Among today's canal boat painters, William Hodgson enjoys a growing reputation. If you go to Ellesmere Port Boat Museum up near Chester, look out for his work. It really is outstanding, and it could do with more local recognition. William Hodgson's son Richard is himself interested in painting, and here's part of a conversation I had with him recently in which I tried to find out what it is that makes his father's work so instantly recognizable.
This is because by nature he was a real artist. You just would not paint slapdash or crudely. A rose in my father's book was a rose. If it was a rose, it got to be a rose. If it was a bird, it got to be a bird. Whatever he was painting, it got to be true to life. You've got to be able to look at the picture and to be able to recognise that picture probably even by the blades of grass.
Well, look, I'm going
That's
to...
how it got to be.
I'm going to show you something now, because I have gathered here perhaps a little bit of evidence. We can't show it to the listeners no matter how hard they look. But we're in front of now a hardboard panel which is about a foot wide across the bottom. It's about 18 inches tall, and it is a castle taken from the side of a boat. It's part of a boat panel.
Yeah.
It's a castle. It's got an evening sky with a sunset. It's got trees in it. It's the traditional sort of castle. There is the lake, and we've got the little yachts in the distance, hills in the background, and a couple of swans in the foreground. Now, when I saw that, I thought of one name, William Hodgson,
Yeah.
I thought. But no, a closer look told me there was something odd about it. Now, you're the man who'd know. Is that your father's work?
No, it is a crude imitation.
Which says something about his reputation, the fact that people are bothering to imitate him.
That's right. His work, whatever he painted, whether it be on a piece of wood, or on canvas, or on satin, or whatever he painted it on, his work, how can I put it? People admired it so much that they wanted to copy it.
He's got a kind of handwriting of his own in
That's
paint,
right.
hasn't he?
Yes.
Without having to put his name on it, you can tell it's him.
You can tell it's him. That's right.
So let us look, for instance, at one of his trademarks. I suppose, really, I've never thought of it that way before, but that's what it is. That pair of swans that we're looking at in this picture are quite stylish, aren't they?
Yes.
But how would they compare with your dad's pair of swans on the lake?
Well, the two swans in the foreground are too uniform, for a start. My father would paint a pair of swans more in the line, as if the male swan was presenting the female with a fish, which I believe is characteristic of the courting, the swan's courting. When father painted a pair of swans, you would even see the reflection of half of the swan's head under the water, submerged, and then the rest of his head and neck. His wing, his left wing, he would take, it was in a position as if he was trying to fly or to reach down, like to grab the fish.
So you would see that as quite a simplification of your father's
Oh yes,
work.
very simple.
Well, let
Yeah.
me take another couple of points then. What do you think about the tree on the left of this painting? Is that your father's style
No.
for painting the tree?
No,
It's the right sort of colour and position
Yes.
somehow, because he did repeat himself in the composition sometimes.
yes,
But there's something flat about that tree.
that's
to
right.
me.
Yes, it's a little bit too artificial. That tree in the foreground would really stand forward. When my father painted that scene as it is now, that castle, you could see it right behind, and you could almost judge the distance. How many yards, or how many miles it would be away from that tree. But as I look at this picture now, I see a flat picture, and I see everything all in one picture. It's hard to describe, really.
I suppose somebody's had an honest-to-goodness admiring attempt
That's
at
right,
copying.
yes.
Oh, and
But-
there's one other thing. I mean, I wonder what you feel about this, but that is a kind of atmospheric picture of a sunset. Now,
Yes.
Your father was very fond of that, and
Yes.
people have said to me, well, perhaps he saw some good ones when he was in Middleport,
Yeah.
in the smoky old days of
That's
30
it.
years ago,
Yeah.
50 years ago.
Yeah.
But is that like your father's sunset sky?
It's an imitation. Again, it's an imitation. Now, one of the things you wouldn't get my dad to do, you see where the red appears on the horizon, like in the far distance, you see it the red sky. You would see a reflection in the water of that red.
And
You
it isn't
would-
picked up in this painting
No.
at all.
All that you get is the colour of the hills in the background. Now, those hills in the background would not reflect in that water in the foreground. The reflection of the sky would grant it, but not the reflection of the hills in the background.
You're looking at it with the eye of a painter yourself, because
Yeah.
you're a painter, but
Yeah.
you're also looking at it with the eye of someone who's looked at your dad at work.
Yeah,
Did he always work in oils?
Father always worked in oils. He just didn't like watercolours. But I've seen him do watercolours, and beautiful watercolours.
I do believe that he was brought out of retirement in the middle 1950s to paint a boat.
That's right, yes, and it was a travelling showroom. He painted that boat, he did all the graining, Everything, he designed it and painted it. And Mr. Borrington, he was the head of the Anderton Company at the time. He even sent the car for my father, to take my father to the Anderton Company to paint there and to bring him back home again afterwards.
Let me put a final point to you. Today, a lot of people, as we've seen from this imitation, admire your dad's work.
Oh yes, yeah.
Does it surprise you that his work has lasted so long?
To be honest with you, if you had a painting of my father's, you just could not cover it up with anything. I think if it was a plate of silver, and if my father had painted a picture on that plate, you just could not cover it up.
Richard Hodgson of Ball Green, talking about the work of his father, William Hodgson. It's interesting to note that in the most scholarly and reliable book on narrowboat painting to be written in the last few years, there are quite a few examples of William Hodgson's lovely work, and also examples of his most gifted imitators. The author, who is himself one of the most original and accomplished of today's boat painters, describes the man from Longport as the leading painter of narrowboats this century in the north of England. Quite a reputation. You'd think that somehow he'd be well known in the potteries, or at least in Middleport, but from what I can gather, William Hodgson was so shy and reserved, he almost never took a seat at the Packhorse Inn or the Duke of Bridgewater, and he spoke to very few people. Boat people apart, it's taken more than 25 years for his story to begin to be known.